This is Gemara Zevachim, Daf Kof Yud Zayin. And believe it or not, we are a few days away from finishing an incredible Mesechta. And for this Daf, the Daf of Chav Teves, the Daf has been sponsored by a long-time Daf learner as a Schos Aliyas Neshama for Yosef ben נחman Chayim Halevi, whose yard site is on Chav Teves, B'siyata Dishmaya. The incredible Kayach HaTorah, the Kayach of Talmud Torah Derabim, learning not the easiest Gemaras, should be Mala, should elevate the Neshama of the Yosef ben נחman Chayim Halevi higher and higher in Gan Eden Shamayla, closer to the Kisei HaKavod, and ultimately be a Militz Yosher for the entire Mishmacha and the entire Chabura, B'siyata Dishmaya. As well as we continue in the month of Teves, so the learning for the month of Teves has been sponsored as a Schos Aliyas Neshama of Aryeh ben Yaakov, the incredible Kayach HaTorah should continuously elevate his Heilig Neshama closer to the Kisei HaKavod. We pick it up on Kufta Zayin and Beis. We're about 12 lines from the bottom at the two dots, which we quote the next part of the Mishnah, which discusses the Yidden in the Midbar, that Kachem Kalim Nacholim B'chol Machani Yisrael, that they were able to eat Kachem Kalim in all camps. Amar Rav Huna, says the Gemara, B'chol Mekaymos Yisrael. Says Rav Huna, that what does it mean? It means in any place of Yisrael. So what does that mean? So the Gemara right now thinks what that means, that even if you're not within the Machaneh, someone walked out, still wherever he is a Makam Yisrael, because he's a Yisrael and he's there. So the Gemara right now thinks that even there you could eat kachim kalim. So ask the Gemara based on that premise, but it sounds like that once you're in the Midbar, there's no machaneh that has a din of machaneh Yisrael. So says the Gemara, what exactly does the Mishnah mean? So says the Gemara, Eisvei, Rav נחman the Rav Huna. Rav נחman asked Rav Huna, Machanois v'Midbar lo yhavoi. Were there really no machanois in the Midbar? You, Rav Huna, just said, wherever you are, you can eat it. Why? I said as a kasha, but let's just, Rav Huna was a statement. Wherever you are, you can eat it. Why? Because you're in a place of a yid, and there are no machanois. Says the Gemara, really? Rav נחman frags to Rav Huna, u'machanois b'midbar lo yhavei. V'atanya, kashem shem machaneh b'midbar, kach machaneh b'Yushalayim. Says the Brisa, just like the machanois in the midbar, the machaneh Yushalayim. Umei Yushalayim la'Rabayis machaneh Yisrael, ma'Rabayis l'shar Nikanor machaneh Leviyah, mikan ve'elach machaneh Shechina. And continues the Brisa, ve'ein kloim sheba midbar. And the Nikanor, the Sharei Nikanor, similar to the Klayim, the curtains in the Midbar. But what do we see klar in this Brisa? We see that there's a din of a machaneh, even when Klal Yisrael is in the Midbar. So asks Rav נחman to Rav Huna, what do you mean? Elaima, so rather explains the Gemara, you know what Rav Huna meant? Chol makayim machaneh Yisrael. The kachim kalim can be eaten in any place of Machaneh Yisrael, that in the Midbar, that is where Kachim Kalim could be eaten, even if the Klal Yisrael is traveling. Remember, it's the Midbar, they're moving along from place to place. So even if they relocate, as long as it's called Machaneh Yisrael, they can eat Kachim Kalim. Says the Gemara, Pshita, what's your kasha? Because it moves, it doesn't, it's a din of Machaneh Yisrael. Explains the Gemara, that maybe from the fact that it went out ostensibly because the camp moved, therefore you would think maybe it has a psul yaitse, kamash malan, that it does not. Frek the Gemara, how do you know? Perhaps hagufa, that by Klal Yisrael moving, it is called yaitse, it is called going out. Explains the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom, Amar Kra, Vinasa Oyel Moed. Says the pasuk in the Almayit shall journey, which shows us Avol Oyal Moyed, who even though it's traveling, even when the Mishkan is disassembled, even when the Mishkan is en route, it has a din of Oyel Moyed. Continues the Gemara. Tanya, new Braisa. Continuing the Machane, how they were arranged in Yerushalayim. Says the Gemara, Tanya, Rashbi Omer, says the Eilig Gershom Bar Yochai, Oy Dacheres Oisa. There was another camp, Vechel Ezras Nashim Hi, and this was the enclosure of the Ezras Nashim. But there were no Einshim. You wouldn't get punished for transgressing, trespassing, for going into this camp. In Shilai, there were only 2 machanes. So says the Gemara, hey minayu loy havai. Asks the Gemara, in Shilai, if there are only 2 and not 3 machanes, so which one was not? So Amar Rabba Mistavra de Machane Levia Havoi. It makes sense that there was a Machane Levia, and what was there not? There was not a Machane Yisrael. As Rashi in the last line articulates, the Machane Yisrael loyu, who the chaser, Tim loikein the Machane Yisrael Havoi below Machane Levia. Why is that Mistaber, says Rabba on the last line? If you're going to tell me there was a Machane Yisrael, there was no Machane Levia, if that was the case, at the Zman that there was the Mishkan Shilai, says the Gemara as we turn over to Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, today's Daf, Nimsu, it would come out, Zavin, someone who is Tamei Zav, Utmei Amesim, someone who's Tamei Ames, Mishalchin chutz lemachane achas. You would only have to go out of one machane, the machane of Shechina. Why? Because a zav and a Tmei Meis, Rashi explains, are mutter in machane Yisrael. So if there was only machane Shechina and machane Yisrael, it would come out a zav, a Tmei Meis has to do what? Leave one camp. Leave the machane Shechina. So what's the problem? Articulates the Gemara V'Atayra Marvela Yitam was a Machane Hem, which is mashma 2 Machanois. 10 Machane Lezeh, Machane Lezeh. So says the Gemara, that's the Raya, that what was not there, Bizman Mishkan Shilai, the Machane Yisrael. But there was Machane Levia, there was Machane L'Shechina. Amar le Rav on the 4th line. Elamai. So what are you telling me? So what? You just explained that, like we just said, there was no Machane Yisrael. It was just Machane Shechina, Machane Levia. Machane Yisrael le'havei nimsu. So then let's go back to the math. Zavin u'mitzayrayim mishalchin l'makayim echad. Comes out that the Zav and the Mitzayra are sent to the same place. What's that place? Chutz Lemachane Shechina, Machane Levia, but they both go to the same location. V'vatayra Amra, stayed in Taira, Badad Yashvav. The Taira says regarding a Mitzayra, you have to sit by yourself. So Yoshev Tamei Achar Imai. But based on what we just said, Frank the Gemara, the Mitzayra and the Tamei Meis are both located in the same place. They're both located in the same place. The Mitzayra is not Yoshav Badad, is not by himself. So explains the Gemara, Elalaylam, 7 lines down, Kulut Lasei. Says the Gemara, really by Mishkan Shilai, all 3 camps were around. And what does it mean that there are only Shtei Machnais in Mashkan Shilai? It means with regard Liklita, regard to the Ari Miklat, regard to the din of providing a safe haven. That's what it means that there was only 2 camps. Says the Gemara Mechlal, so it sounds like to be Midbar, have Kalta Machane Levia. So it sounds like that in the Midbar, Machane Levia is where they went, And that's what you're learning. That's what it means with regard that there's two machanais in Mishkan Shiloi. Says Gemara in, yes. Ve'atanya, and I'll prove this from Abraisa. Ve'samti l'cha makayim b'chayecha, I'll place you, ve'samti l'cha makayim, Shem will give you a place to run. When it says l'cha for you b'chayecha, it means in your life, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. While you, Moshe, is alive, there's going to be a place for someone to run. Makayim, the fact that he'll give you a makayim mikaymecha, that means your place, you Moshe Rabbeinu, your place, the Machna Leviyah, that is where what? Ashayana Shama, you're going to run. Melamed Shemegalin Ba'midbar. This means that what? They, in the Midbar, they were Maglin, they were exiled in the Midbar, where Lechan Godlin Lamachan Leviyah. Mikan Amru, from here we learn out. Ben Levi Shaharax. What does a Ben Levi do? If everyone else is going to Machane Leviyah, so what does a Ben Levi do? He goes from city to city. Vim Gala Lepal Chai. And if he went to his own city, Pilchai Katlai, then indeed his own city gives him refuge. My Korah, where do we see this in the Pasuk? Amar Ravacha, Breder Rav Ika, Kibir Meklata Yashaiv, Ir Shal Kaltasai, Kivar. So says the Gemara, indeed, Bizman Mishkan Shilai, there were really three camps. There was Machna Leviyah, Shechina, and Yisrael. But Klape, the din, that one who kills has a place to run, there was only two camps, and he went to Machna Leviyah. Which is seen from the fact that we know that while Moshe Rabbeinu was alive, there was no din of Ari Mikla. Even though one of the tremendously mudim, Moshe Rabbeinu started creating Ari Miklat, but there was no din that the Ari Miklat that were created had the power of being a safe haven until all Ari Miklats were created. So Moshe created his three, even though he knew the other three would not exist. Why? Because he just did his own. But the Torah teaches us there was a din of Ari Miklat in Machaneh Leviyah. And we continue about smack in the middle of the Amud, Ba'uli Gilgal. The Mishnah said, when Klal Yisrael came to Gilgal, what happened? You're allowed to make Bamais again. Says the Gemara Tanarabanan, we learned in Abraisa, called Nidar V'Nidav. Anyone makes a neder on a davaya karav b'bama would bring it on his own private bama. Shei nidar v'nidav. But something that is not a neder or nedava, something which is a obligatory, a mechuyev dika carbon, ein karav b'bama. So says the Braisa, you bring in a bama, only your own voluntary nedarim unedavais. Mincha, Niziros, Krivim Bebama, Divi Rameir. But says Rameir, there is one type of carbon which isn't a straight up Neder Nadava, which is Niziros, and a carbon Mincha, which are forms of Neder Nadava. They're also brought on a Bama. Chachamim Aimim, like Karvu, say the Chachamim, like Karvu Yachid, Ella Oilais Ushlamim Bilvad. Say the Chachamim, nothing was brought in this Zman at this time where they were in Gilgal and they permitted Bamais, private Bamais, say the Chachamim. What was brought in those Bamais? Ayla and Shlamim. However, one's personal Karbanais, one's Neder, one's Nidava, the Mincha and the Nazir, those were not brought, say the Chachamim. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Imer says, Rabbi Yehuda, Kol Shat Sibor, Ve'hayachid Makrivim B'Yom anything that the Sibor, anything that the Yachid brings in the Oyel Moyed, Bamid Sheba Midbar, Makrivim B'Yom Sheba Gilgal. So these are going to be the Karbanais Sibor that are brought. And where are they brought? In the Midbar, they're brought on a tziburi bama, not a private bama. So they're going to be brought similarly when they were in Gilgal. Says the Gemara. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, what is the difference? Explains the Gemara, that when the oil mayed was in the midbar, there were no private bramais allowed. But when it was in Gilgal, like we just saw, there were private bramais allowed. Ubamaisai, and one's own bama shebarei shagag, on his roof, his private altar, they would not bring upon it ela ushlamim. However, a mincha, as we just saw, on his nazir, as we just saw, were not allowed to be brought there. That is Rabbi Yehuda. Chachamim Aimrim kol she'asiv makrivin ba'al ma'id shabem midbar makriv shamayit shabel gilgel v'kan, and here and there, both on a bama of the tzibur, both on a bama of a yachid, v'kan like karvu yachid elo ilu shlamim bilvad. Another Rashita, Rabbi Shimon Omer, av tzibur lo yikrivu. Rav Shimon argues, and he says, no oilais, no shlamim, but rather the only thing that is brought were the carbon Pesach. That is what is brought. Elab that is what is brought on the bama of the tzibur. As we turn over to Kuf Yizayim and Bey, says the Gemara, and v'chayvais shekavua lahem zman, and any chiyuv similar to the carbon Pesach that has a specific zman attached to it, that as well you're going to be able to bring. What is that? That is similar to the Yom Tovim, which you bring a carbon musaf. Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, you bring a carbon musaf, as well as the daily carbon talmud. Of course, the daily carbon talmud has a zman to it, and that is what was brought bisman, that there were the bamais of the tzibur. So says the Gemara, long and lengthy brayso, multiple shitais. My time of the Rameir, says the Gemara, the top line, Kavizayim Mebeis. What is the reason of Rameir? Why does Rameir say that which is a chiyav you cannot bring on your private bama? Explains the Gemara, Damar Cross, says the Torah, Loi sa'ason kechol asher anachnu oisim poi hayoim. Cannot do anything that you should not do everything that we do here today. And from here we see that during the time of Kivush Eretz Yisrael, for the Yud Daled Shana, the 14 years, as well as the period that followed, that they gave out the Karka, the land of Eretz Yisrael, there was none of these private bamais. And the Gemara now explains that what happened, Yisrael, when you go to Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu of course didn't, but Moshe is giving Klal Yisrael the charge that when you enter Eretz Yisrael, and during those 14 years, Yeshara Isakrivu, you could only bring a Yashar, that which is needed, that which is proper, referring to voluntary offerings. Nadarim unadavais, b'chayvais loisakrivu. Mincha unazirais are Yesharis ninu. That is Shitas Rabbi Meir regarding a private bama. V'Rabbanan, they of course argue and they say no, ein mincha b'bama. There's no mincha b'bama. As regard to Naziros, chayvais ninu, they're called chayvais, and that is the reason why they cannot be brought, say the chachamim. So we have a machlaikas, Rabbi Meir chachamim, from within a larger context machlaikas within the brayso. But as we just quoted, Rabbi Meir and the chachamim are arguing in particular whether we're going to bring the mincha naziros. The Rabbanan say, ein mincha bebama, say the chachamim. As regarding the naziros, they are chayvais, and therefore you cannot bring. But according to Rameir, they're called yashar, and you could yes bring. So Amar Shmuel says, Shmuel 8 lines down, what is this particular machlokes? Machlokes bechatos ve'osho. The machlokes is by the chatos and osham of the nazir. The Rameir says these are voluntary, The Chachamim say these are chiyuvi. Aval, there's another carbon that the Nazir brings. Ve'oilaisu shlamim of the Nazir. Divrei hakol yesheirais ninhu. Everyone holds their yasha, their voluntary v'karvin, you bring them. So explain Shmuel. The machlokes Rameir and Chachamim klape on Nazir is not by all karbanis. Is the chatos, is the asham. However, by the oilos and the shlamim, those are avada, not obligatory, and everyone agrees you could, yes, bring them. Masiv Rabbi Aser Rabba says the Brisa Chazav Ishaik. When the Kayin does the tenufa, the waving of the breast and the thigh of the shlamim and the taida, trumais, lachmei taida, as well as the separation of the 4 lechamim loaves of the carbon taida. That is, Noyahagin says the Brisa Bibama Gedayla Vinohagi Bibama Ketana. That is the Brisa. So what does it seem? It seems to imply that they're only brought on the Bama Gedayla, not on one's own private Bama. V'ilu, says the Gemara, Hazraya B'Sheila, Shayara. It does not mention the cooked 4-leg. So what's the kasha? So if you're going to tell me, not like Shmuel, that they don't only argue about the chatos and the asham, they also argue about what? The oil and the shlamim. Then it comes out, based on what they argue about, Amani, this brisa is going to be home, the Rabbanon, that you're not going to bring the shlamim on the private bama. Ela frakti Gemara. 8 lines to the bottom. Yamre bechatos ve'asham pligi. Like you, Shmuel said, that they argue by the chatos and the asham. Hamani. It comes out that this brisa is going to be like no one. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ela itmar, hachi itmar. 8 lines from the bottom, Amar Shmuel, Machlekes by Lushlam. Avo b'chatos ve'asham, mamish v'kert. A moment we said chatos v'asham, everyone agrees it's yashar, everyone agrees it's in a dove, everyone agrees you could bring it on a private bama. Now says the Gemara, you don't bring them on the private bama. Stop over here, I'll pick it up from here, V'siyata Dishmaya.